Pamela adjusted the thin straps of her borrowed evening gown, trying to ignore the fact that she felt like a fish out of water. The grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel shimmered with chandeliers, the soft hum of violinists playing an elegant waltz. She had never seen so many designer suits, glittering necklaces, and five-figure wristwatches in one place. The event was a charity ball, something she had only read about in magazines, and Pamela's heart pounded with both excitement and unease as she crossed the threshold into this opulent world. She had arrived on the arm of a friend who worked in PR, who had insisted that Pamela would fit right in with her refined poise and calm smile. In reality, Pamela was 28 years old, worked as an administrative assistant, and was used to grocery shopping on a budget. Yet, she couldn't resist her curiosity about how the other half lived, so she took her friend's spare ticket and decided to indulge in this night of high society. Before she had time to dwell on her insecurities, a tall, impeccably dressed man approached. He wore a tailored suit that seemed sculpted to his broad shoulders, and his shoes gleamed beneath the ballroom lights. "I don't believe we've met," he said with a confident smile, extending his hand. His voice resonated with certainty, as though he was used to having things go his way. "I'm Ethan." Pamela politely shook his hand, noticing how his eyes glinted with an air of self-assurance. His charm was unmistakable. Within minutes, they were engaged in conversation about everything from the charity's cause to the latest trends in the stock market. She learned he was 35, an investment tycoon known for shrewd business deals and philanthropic gestures that made headlines. Ethan appeared intrigued by her, especially by the fact that she wasn't part of his usual social circle. He wanted to know what she did, where she grew up, what her dreams were. For a moment, Pamela felt that under his polished exterior, there might be a genuine interest waiting to be discovered. All the while, in the back of her mind, Pamela's thoughts lingered on Sabelo, her boyfriend of 3 years who had declined to come because the ticket was far too expensive. He was 30 and an aspiring artist with a passion that seemed unquenchable, forever sketching and painting, even when money was tight. In that moment, though, it was easy for Pamela to get swept away by the glitter and attention. She felt something stir inside her, a hunger for a life she'd never really considered before. By the end of the night, Ethan insisted on walking her to her car. Flashy camera lights from the event photographers captured them laughing together, painting a picture of effortless glamour. As they exchanged numbers, Pamela had no idea that this fateful meeting would set her on a collision course between two very different futures, one shaped by love's sincerity, and the other shaped by material allure. In the days following the charity ball, Pamela found herself texting with Ethan more often than she cared to admit. What started as polite conversation about the event quickly turned into late-night chats about life, career ambitions, and his love for adventure. He regaled her with stories of spontaneous weekend trips to foreign countries and closed-door deals in penthouse boardrooms. Every interaction seemed to come with an undertone of excitement, as if Ethan held the keys to a world she'd never known. Meanwhile, things at home with Sabelo were noticeably tense. He had waited up for her the night of the charity ball, greeting her with a warm hug despite the hour. Sabelo often worked odd jobs to supplement his income as an artist, sometimes bartending at local art events, other times assisting in interior design projects. His hopeful eyes had asked silently how the evening went, but Pamela was too consumed by the glitz to share much detail. She simply mentioned it was interesting, leaving him with a vague understanding that she had a good time. Over the next week, Pamela felt a shift in how she viewed Sabelo's world. She had always been proud of his tenacity, how he never gave up on a new technique or idea. But his tiny apartment-turned-studio, once cozy and endearing, suddenly felt cramped. Stacks of canvases lined the walls, and every piece of furniture doubled as a space for creating art. It dawned on her that his vision, while grand, offered no immediate security. One afternoon, Sabelo invited her to see a run-down warehouse on the outskirts of town. Excitement coursed through his voice as he pointed out the high ceilings, ample square footage, and potential for a vast art studio. He explained that he planned to host workshops and gallery nights there, envisioning a creative hub for fellow artists. The rent was cheap, but the renovations would be extensive. Standing in the dusty space, Pamela felt a pang in her chest. She saw the ambitious sparkle in Sabelo's eyes but worried about how long it might take him to turn these dreams into reality. Their car ride home was silent, as if both sensed the growing rift between them. That evening, after washing dinner dishes together in relative quiet, Pamela checked her phone. A message from Ethan lit the screen. "Thinking about our conversation. Let's plan a day together. I know just the spot for a perfect lunch." She felt an unsteady mixture of guilt and excitement. A part of her craved the escape from the mounting financial concerns that tethered her to Sabelo's precarious path. Another part questioned if she was betraying the life they had built. Yet, as she slid into bed next to Sabelo, who was already half asleep, the hush of the room weighed on her. She recalled the lavish hotel ballroom, the sense of being someone else, someone confident, carefree, and surrounded by luxury. Could she really blame herself for wanting a slice of that? She drifted to sleep, torn between the man she had always believed in and the new world beckoning her with a siren's call. Ethan's invitation came with more extravagance than Pamela had anticipated. Instead of a simple day out, he planned a weekend getaway at a luxury resort perched on a nearby coastal cliff. After exchanging numerous texts and phone calls, Pamela found herself both intrigued and uneasy. Despite her conscience warning her to be cautious, she was struggling to resist the thrill of a lavish escape. On a Friday afternoon, Ethan sent a car to pick her up from her modest apartment building. Pamela knew she should have told Sabelo about the trip, but their conversations had grown stilted. Every time she tried to bring up Ethan or the possibility of a weekend away, an argument felt inevitable. So she had decided on silence, an omission that weighed heavily on her heart. The ride to the resort felt surreal. Plush leather seats, chilled champagne, and a chauffeur who politely opened and closed doors for her. Pamela couldn't recall ever being treated this way. When they arrived, Ethan was waiting in a crisp linen shirt, arms casually folded across his chest as the ocean breeze ruffled his hair. With a grin, he escorted her to a private suite overlooking the sparkling waters. The moment she stepped inside, the sheer opulence almost took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a terrace with a hot tub, and a sunken living room appointed with fresh flowers and fruit baskets. As dusk approached, they strolled along the beach, discussing everything from their childhood dreams to life philosophies. Ethan was surprisingly candid, sharing how he rose from a middle-class family to become a self-made millionaire. His story of risk-taking and relentless hustle resonated with Pamela, who admired his ambition and seemed momentarily blinded to the cost of such success. By the time they returned to the suite for dinner, she felt an inexplicable closeness to him, as if they had bridged the gap between strangers and confidants in just a matter of hours. That night, they dined under the stars, sampling a 6-course tasting menu that included delicacies she had never even heard of. The evening sparkled with conversation, laughter, and the soft glow of candlelight reflecting off her wine glass. For a moment, Pamela allowed herself to forget the outside world, to erase the guilt gnawing at the back of her mind. This was the kind of luxury she had only dreamed about. Yet, a small voice inside her whispered about Sabelo. His unwavering belief in his art, the gentle way he supported her dreams, and how he never asked for anything except her faith in him. But that night, as she drifted off in a bed so soft it felt like a cloud, the wealth and attention surrounding her muffled that voice. She told herself she deserved this taste of the good life. Tomorrow she would go home, clear her head, and sort out her feelings. Until then, she let the warm breeze and the rhythmic crash of the waves lull her into a restful sleep, unaware of the whirlwind she was about to unleash in her own life. The return from the resort felt like stepping back into a less vibrant reality, and the contrast jarred Pamela's senses. She arrived at her small apartment to find Sabelo waiting for her on the front stoop, tension evident in his posture. She had texted him earlier saying she'd be away with friends, but he wasn't fooled. Sabelo's eyes brimmed with hurt, demanding explanations she wasn't prepared to give. They climbed the familiar creaking steps in silence. Once inside, the apartment they had shared for over a year felt colder, as though the energy between them had shifted irreversibly. The moment the door closed, Sabelo asked through clenched teeth, "Where have you been, Pamela? And why couldn't you tell me the truth?" His tone stung. She could see he had spent countless hours in anxious worry, likely imagining all the worst scenarios. Instead of addressing his questions directly, she lashed out, spewing her own frustrations. "Maybe I'm tired of scraping by and living in uncertainty. You have big dreams, Sabelo, but there's no stability. I need more." Her voice cracked, tears threatening to spill. She didn't intend to hurt him, but the words tumbled out with more venom than she realized she possessed. Sabelo's response was one of desperation tinged with heartbreak. He insisted he was on the cusp of something significant. His art was improving, he had leads on commissions, and the warehouse space was slowly coming together. He asked for more time, more patience, promising that once everything aligned, they would thrive. "Trust me, Pamela. We've come this far. Don't give up on me now," he pleaded, his eyes rimmed with tears. But the events of the past weekend, coupled with the allure of wealth and security, had already taken root in Pamela's mind. She felt guilty for betraying him, but she also couldn't ignore her hunger for a more comfortable life. The argument swelled with anger, accusations, and confessions of betrayal. Finally, through choked sobs, Pamela admitted that she didn't believe his dreams would materialize quickly enough for them to build a stable future. In the wake of her words, a shell-shocked silence filled the room. Sabelo stood there, heartbreak etched into his features. Slowly, he sank onto the battered sofa, dropping his face into his hands. Pamela tried to approach him to apologize, but he shook his head, refusing to meet her gaze. After what felt like an eternity, she realized she couldn't stay. She felt suffocated by her own guilt, uncertain of what she truly wanted, but convinced she couldn't keep lying to him or to herself. That night, Pamela packed a small suitcase and moved into a friend's spare bedroom. She left the key on the kitchen table, along with a handwritten note apologizing for everything she couldn't fix. Although she felt immediate remorse, a stubborn part of her mind insisted this was for the best. She had chosen a different path, one that might offer the security she craved, even if it meant leaving Sabelo behind. For better or worse, the chapter of their shared life had ended. In the days that followed, Pamela found herself gradually drawn into Ethan's world. He offered her a temporary place to stay in his penthouse while she figured things out. The spacious skyline residence was nothing like the cramped one-bedroom she shared with Sabelo. Gleaming marble floors extended across the living area, tastefully decorated with modern art and sleek, minimalist furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a panorama of the city's twinkling lights, a daily reminder of the power and privilege that came with Ethan's wealth. At first, Pamela was cautious about moving in with him so suddenly. But with nowhere else that felt like home, she accepted. And once she was there, Ethan practically rolled out the red carpet. He introduced her to his circle of affluent friends, people who owned vacation homes in 3 different continents, boasted about insider stock tips, and regularly spoke of 6-figure purchases as if they were trifling. It was heady, intoxicating, and entirely foreign to Pamela's previous life. Despite the glitz, Pamela began noticing cracks in this shiny new reality. She observed how Ethan's phone never seemed to stop buzzing with calls from clients and investors. In between conversations about their next vacation or the gourmet restaurant they'd try for dinner, Ethan would slip into business talk. His tone detached and purely transactional. His entire being seemed fueled by the pursuit of more. More deals, more wealth, more prestige. Pamela found it both admirable and unsettling. She tried to fit in, attending cocktail parties at rooftop bars and black-tie charity dinners. Her wardrobe expanded almost overnight, courtesy of Ethan's insistence on dressing her in designer brands. The transition from budget-conscious to pampered was surreal. On one hand, she reveled in the newfound security and the ease with which money could smooth out life's inconveniences. On the other hand, she wrestled with a nagging feeling that she was losing herself, or at least, burying a part of her that once believed life was about creativity, authenticity, and emotional depth. Late at night, after the parties and elaborate dinners, Ethan often retreated to a study lined with finance books and framed accolades. He would be on his laptop, sending emails and checking stock prices, while Pamela sipped tea by the window, gazing at the city below. The distance between them became palpable. Even though they shared the same penthouse, it felt as though they lived in separate worlds. She wondered if this was truly love or just convenience, an arrangement where Ethan provided her with everything she thought she wanted, and in return, she offered him companionship and an image of stability he projected to others. Still, she pushed her doubts aside, convincing herself that with time, Ethan would open up. Maybe he needed to see she was committed to him before showing his vulnerable side. She found fleeting moments of tenderness in his morning kisses, or the way he'd rest his hand on her lower back in a crowded room, claiming her as his own. These small gestures kept her hopeful that beneath the surface, a genuine connection might bloom. One evening, Ethan invited Pamela to a prestigious gala celebrating a successful merger his company had orchestrated. The event was held at the top floor of an iconic skyscraper, and guests arrived in designer gowns and sharp-tailored tuxedos. Pamela wore a shimmering silver dress that Ethan had custom-ordered for her, complete with matching stilettos that accentuated her slender figure. She felt radiant under the soft glow of chandeliers, though a trace of nervousness lingered in her stomach. As the night progressed, influential business magnates and socialites approached Ethan, congratulating him on the brilliant deal that had boosted his profile even further. Pamela found herself standing beside him, smiling politely and fielding questions about her background. She grew accustomed to the admiring glances, the compliments, and even the mild jealousy from those who saw her as yet another testament to Ethan's perfect life. Near the climax of the evening, Ethan stepped away from his group of colleagues and crossed the room with purpose. The DJ abruptly cut the music, and a hush fell over the guests. Curiosity hung in the air like static electricity as Ethan took Pamela's hand, lowered himself onto one knee, and presented her with a small velvet box. Her heart hammered against her chest, and she realized with sudden clarity that this was a public proposal. Cameras clicked, capturing every gasp and wide-eyed expression among the crowd. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you," Ethan declared, his voice poised yet fervent enough to carry. He opened the box to reveal a shimmering diamond that must have cost more than most people earned in a year. Pamela's mind whirled. She felt heat rising to her cheeks, fully aware that dozens of eyes were watching, waiting for her answer. Overwhelmed by the attention and the spectacle, she heard herself utter a trembling yes. Applause erupted as Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger. Strangers cheered, cameras flashed, and the DJ struck up celebratory music. Pamela forced a brilliant smile, momentarily swept up in the grand romantic display. However, once the immediate flurry of congratulations subsided, she caught sight of her reflection in a mirrored wall. She observed the colossal diamond encasing her ring finger. It felt strangely heavy, as if it symbolized not only Ethan's commitment but also her own entrapment. She couldn't shake the memory of a day when Sabelo had given her a small carved piece of driftwood with her name etched in it, a simple gesture, but one bursting with sincere affection. Now, she was wearing a ring that practically screamed wealth, yet she couldn't feel the same warmth in her chest. Throughout the rest of the night, she navigated well-wishers who kept calling her the future Mrs. Ethan. Each time she heard the phrase, a knot tightened in her stomach. She put on a brave face and tried to enjoy the champagne toasts, the lavish buffet, and the orchestral music. But the lavishness only magnified the stark contrast with the sincerity she missed so dearly. And though she felt incredibly guilty for thinking it, she couldn't help but wonder if Ethan's reasons for this grand proposal were rooted in genuine love or his desire for a flawless public image. Pamela awoke the next morning with a massive diamond still on her finger, catching the sunlight that streamed through the penthouse windows. The engagement had happened so quickly, and in such a spectacular manner, that she almost believed she had dreamed it. Yet the ring remained, a sparkly reminder of the promise she had made under immense social pressure. Ethan was already gone for the day, attending an early breakfast meeting to discuss yet another merger. He left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter, congratulating her on their engagement and reminding her to meet with the wedding planner. Feeling an odd combination of excitement and dread, Pamela went about her morning routine, the weight of her new status pressing on her mind. Later that day, she found herself in a high-end bridal boutique, accompanied by a famous event coordinator known for orchestrating weddings that splashed across magazine covers. Every detail, from flower arrangements to monogrammed napkins, was treated as if it would be scrutinized by the entire world. The coordinator rattled off names of exclusive venues, discussing how the event needed to reflect Ethan's level of sophistication. Pamela tried to keep up, nodding politely as swatches of lace, satin, and organza were thrust in front of her. In what felt like a whirlwind, she was measured and fitted for designer gowns that draped her figure in shimmering embroidery. Each dress was more elaborate than the last, and she lost track of price tags that soared well into 5 digits. She couldn't help but feel numb. As she stared at her reflection in a full-length mirror, she barely recognized the woman gazing back, a polished stranger buried under Tulle and Swarovski crystals. Back at the penthouse, she voiced some of her concerns to Ethan, timidly suggesting they opt for a simpler, more intimate ceremony. He brushed off the idea with a gentle laugh, insisting that a wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime occasion that deserved no expense spared. "Don't worry, my love," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You deserve nothing but the best. Let me handle everything." Yet, despite his affectionate tone, Pamela sensed that this wedding was more of a grand production than a celebration of their union. Friends and family called to congratulate her, marveling at the pictures of her ring and praising her upcoming nuptials. But her parents hesitated, noticing the uncertainty in her voice whenever she mentioned how perfect everything was. They suggested maybe a smaller wedding in a location that felt more like home, but Pamela relayed Ethan's grand ideas, stifling her own misgivings with each call. As the days turned into weeks, she felt the noose of opulence tightening around her. Invitations were being engraved, honeymoon destinations discussed, and deposits for venues placed without her input. Her face smiled from the pages of a glossy engagement announcement, labeled New Power Couple, yet she couldn't shake the sense of being trapped in a gilded cage. She thought about Sabelo often, remembering how it felt to plan for a future driven by a shared vision rather than lavish budgets. The sadness that accompanied those memories grew heavier, but she didn't know how to escape the path she'd chosen, or if she even had the courage to. One afternoon, as Pamela browsed through selections of wedding centerpieces at an upscale florist, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from an old friend, Melissa, who worked in the local art community. The text read, "I just saw an amazing showcase. Sabelo's work was featured. You won't believe the buzz he's creating." Pamela's breath caught. She hadn't thought of Sabelo in any significant detail for weeks, attempting to push him from her mind each time his name surfaced. But the curiosity proved too strong. She quickly called Melissa to get the full story. Melissa explained that a prominent gallery had showcased Sabelo's unique digital meets traditional paintings, and one influential art critic had raved about his originality. The local art scene was abuzz with rumors that he might soon receive an international offer. A mix of emotions flooded Pamela's chest. Pride for the man she once loved, regret for leaving him, or maybe relief that he was finally achieving what he had always set out to accomplish. The swirling feelings caught her off guard, prompting her to step outside the florist shop for some air. Memories of the dusty warehouse flashed through her mind. Sabelo's excitement as he talked about hosting art events, the sparkle in his eyes when discussing the community he wanted to build. Trying to refocus, she returned to the daily tasks of selecting arrangements that matched Ethan's color palette. But the news about Sabelo wouldn't leave her alone. That evening, at a dinner with Ethan and some of his high-profile associates, she found herself zoning out, half listening to discussions of hedge funds and growth strategies. Her fingers absent-mindedly touched the diamond ring, now a symbol of the life she had chosen, while her thoughts drifted to canvas paintings and open warehouses. Later that night, Pamela scrolled through social media, stumbling upon photos of Sabelo's gallery opening. He stood in front of his artwork, dressed in a simple yet stylish outfit, greeting admirers with genuine warmth. The next photo showed him posing with the gallery owner, a delighted grin on his face. Looking at his expression, Pamela couldn't help but compare it to the forced smiles she had been wearing at event after event. The difference was stark. Sabelo radiated genuine joy and a sense of belonging, whereas she felt increasingly like a prop in Ethan's world. As she closed her phone, guilt churned in her stomach. She couldn't deny the longing in her heart to congratulate Sabelo, to let him know she was proud of him. Yet, she was also well aware of how shallow her actions would appear. Having left him in his most vulnerable time only to now resurface when he was on the verge of significant success. But deep inside, she felt an ache that whispered, "You made a mistake. You left someone who truly cared. And now you're chained to something that feels hollow." For the moment, she kept those whispers locked inside. The wedding was speeding toward her like a runaway train, and she couldn't afford to let nostalgia derail her life plans. Or could she? The question lingered, a small but insistent voice in the back of her mind. As the wedding date neared, Pamela found herself descending deeper into a cycle of insomnia and second-guessing. By day, she tried on designer dresses, attended cake tastings, and feigned excitement for exotic honeymoon destinations. By night, she tossed and turned, haunted by the feeling that she was orchestrating a performance rather than preparing for a meaningful union. The pressure around her mounted. Ethan's mother called daily to discuss guest lists and table placements. The wedding coordinator emailed color-coded schedules detailing every minute of the ceremony. Even the press had caught wind of the upcoming nuptials, with a few local lifestyle columns labeling it the wedding of the year. For someone like Pamela, who had been raised with modest means, the spotlight felt disorienting and suffocating. During a rare quiet evening with Ethan, he had just returned from yet another business trip, Pamela mustered the courage to voice her concerns. She mentioned feeling overwhelmed, that maybe their wedding didn't need to be so extravagant. "We could scale back," she suggested gently. "Make it a bit more personal. Invite only the people we truly care about." Ethan's eyes barely flicked up from the financial report he was scanning on his tablet. With a calm sigh, he insisted everything would be perfect if she just trusted him. "I know how to make this wedding a grand success," he said, as though it were another corporate project. "All you have to do is show up and look stunning." That response lodged in Pamela's chest like a splinter. She realized he viewed this wedding more as a statement of status than a celebration of love. The dreaded thought formed unbidden. Maybe she was just another trophy in Ethan's curated life. She wanted to believe that his feelings for her were genuine, but every passing day and dismissive conversation hammered her doubts deeper. Adding fuel to her internal turmoil, she discovered more news about Sabelo's rising fame. A local TV station ran a segment on his artwork, featuring interviews with art collectors who praised his refreshing style. His name trended in local online forums, with people commenting how an underdog like Sabelo is what the art scene needs. Despite the sense of betrayal she believed he still harbored toward her, Pamela felt a tug of pride seeing him succeed. She recalled how he used to sit cross-legged in their cramped living room, painting at all hours, never giving up. Late one night, she lay awake staring at the diamond ring that glittered on her bedside table. In it, she saw a reflection of her face, and for a split second, she thought she saw sadness etched into the shimmering facets. She rolled over, hugging a pillow, wishing she could erase the confusion that had replaced the optimism she once felt. The woman who had looked forward to building a life with someone she loved was gone, replaced by a bride-to-be who couldn't escape the sense that she had traded her happiness for a veneer of wealth. Something had to give. Whether it meant confiding in Ethan, confronting her own guilt about Sabelo, or even reconsidering the wedding itself, she knew she couldn't continue this charade for much longer. Yet, she also felt trapped by her own pride, unable to admit she might have chosen wrongly. Each day passed in a haze of planning and pretense, carrying her forward to a future she wasn't sure she wanted. Just a week before the wedding, Ethan called Pamela to say he was flying out of town for an urgent meeting with international investors. He asked her to attend a philanthropic art event in his stead and represent them both graciously. Exhausted by the rigors of wedding planning, Pamela almost declined, but he insisted. As one of the event's sponsors, Ethan felt it crucial that someone show up to maintain goodwill. The art event took place at a sleek new gallery downtown. Tall ceilings and white walls displayed vibrant pieces from local and international artists, each competing for the attention of well-heeled patrons. Walking through the entrance, Pamela paused to smooth down her cocktail dress and brace herself for an evening of polite mingling. She scanned the crowd for familiar faces when something caught her eye. A painting with bold, sweeping brushstrokes reminiscent of Sabelo's style. Heart-pounding, she followed the sign that led to a separate wing featuring emerging artists. She turned a corner, and there he was. Sabelo, dressed in a simple navy blazer and black slacks, speaking to a small group of art enthusiasts. In that moment, Pamela's stomach lurched. She considered fleeing, but something glued her feet to the floor. A flood of memories surged through her mind. Their first date at a humble coffee shop, the night spent on his sofa watching him paint under dim lamps, the tearful argument when she ended things. She watched him from a distance, noticing the growth in his demeanor. There was confidence in his posture, a light in his eyes that spoke of pride and fulfillment. The small crowd around him seemed genuinely captivated. As if sensing her presence, he turned. Their eyes locked, and the world seemed to shrink to that singular moment. Hesitant yet compelled, Pamela approached. Sabelo's greeting was cordial, his smile tinged with caution. They exchanged a few strained pleasantries. He congratulated her on her engagement, and she offered a soft congratulations on the showcase. He acknowledged that his career had taken an unexpected but welcome turn, and despite the lingering hurt, he seemed genuinely happy for her new life. His words felt like a quiet reproach, yet they also carried a mature acceptance of what had happened. They stood in awkward silence, the echoes of the gallery filling the space between them. Finally, Sabelo excused himself to talk to a potential buyer, leaving Pamela to wander the exhibit alone. She studied his pieces closely, each canvas telling a vivid story of struggle, hope, and eventual triumph. Gazing upon his art, a lump formed in her throat. She realized how much of Sabelo's soul was poured into every brushstroke, something she had once cherished but now had abandoned for a life of superficial glamour. Later, as the event wound down, their eyes met across the room one last time. A sense of loss welled up in Pamela's chest. She recalled the love and faith they had once shared. Now they were strangers, each on a path chosen with unwavering conviction. She couldn't muster the courage to say another goodbye, so she simply nodded and turned away. As she stepped out into the chilly night, she felt tears threatening. She clasped Ethan's diamond ring, loathing how heavy it felt. For the first time in a long while, she admitted to herself that regret had lodged itself firmly in her heart. Returning to Ethan's penthouse after that chance encounter with Sabelo, Pamela was awash in conflicting emotions. She dropped her purse on the sleek kitchen counter and slipped off her heels. The lights of the city sparkled through the panoramic windows, a breathtaking sight she had once found enchanting. Now it felt alien, reminding her of the distance she had traveled from the person she used to be. Her reflection caught her eye in the mirrored backsplash. She looked well-dressed, polished, but also tired, perhaps more tired than she'd ever been. She fiddled with the enormous diamond ring, remembering how her hand used to feel in Sabelo's, paint still drying on his fingertips. Those memories, once treasured, now felt like echoes in a cavernous emptiness. She sank onto the plush sofa and let out a shaky breath. Ethan arrived home past midnight. His demeanor was hurried, his conversation sprinkled with references to closing deals and an important client dinner the next night. Sensing Pamela's mood, he asked her what was wrong, but when she attempted to explain, haltingly, uncertainly, that she felt overwhelmed and disconnected, he waved off her concerns. "It's pre-wedding jitters," he declared, walking over to a cabinet to pour himself a whiskey. "You'll see. Once we're married, Everything will settle into place. But instead of comforting her, his words rattled her. She asked him if he truly loved her or if she was just another shiny acquisition. Stung by the question, Ethan's eyes narrowed. He reminded her of the extravagant proposal, the opulent wedding plans, and all the gifts he'd lavished upon her. He claimed he was marrying her because she made him happy and complimented his lifestyle. "We're a perfect match," he insisted. "We can conquer anything together." Pamela, on the verge of tears, tried to press him further about his emotional investment in their future, but he retreated behind a wall of business jargon, proclaiming that their union was meant to be a powerful alliance. Her heart sank. Was he even aware of how callous that sounded? The tension in the room thickened, and when Ethan eventually retired to the master bedroom, Pamela remained on the sofa, staring at the city lights that had once seemed magical. As the hours crept by, she realized how absurd it was to feel more alone here than she ever had in Sabelo's modest flat. Ethan's world, with all its glittering promise, suddenly seemed hollow. But she was in too deep now, only days away from the wedding that society pages were already hailing as the event of the year. She closed her eyes, recalling the look on Sabelo's face at the gallery event, the underlying hurt behind his polite smile. Her regret tightened its grip, and she wondered if she could summon the courage to break away from a life that was devouring her from the inside. She wanted to believe it wasn't too late to change course, but her fear and pride stood as towering barriers, daring her to confront them before making a life-altering decision. The week of the wedding dawned with fanfare. Invitations had been sent months earlier, RSVP cards returned, final deposits paid for everything from the gourmet catering to the string quartet. Social media was ablaze with excitement, Ethan's social circle buzzing about the upcoming nuptials, and local press hinting at an exclusive spread in a high-end magazine. Pamela floated through it all like a ghost, going through the motions while her mind roiled with indecision. In a surprising twist of fate, news broke that Sabelo had been invited to showcase his work at an influential international gallery. A prominent collector discovered him at the local event and was impressed by his evocative style. Bloggers, journalists, and art aficionados sang his praises. The story of a self-made artist with humble beginnings captivated the public imagination. Soon, his name topped the list of artists to watch, and the once desolate warehouse he had painstakingly transformed was now bustling with assistants, patrons, and photographers. Pamela followed these developments from afar, both thrilled for him and torn by guilt. Some nights she stayed up late, scrolling through articles and video interviews in which Sabelo spoke passionately about the power of creativity and perseverance. His voice resonated with conviction, and every word felt like a reminder of the life she had left behind. She pictured him in that warehouse, filling the once empty walls with vibrancy and hope, all the while forging ahead without her. Yet, she was days away from wearing a designer gown and stepping into a future where wealth was guaranteed, albeit at the potential cost of genuine emotional connection. During a tense meeting with Ethan and the wedding coordinator, Pamela tried to mention Sabelo's success, wondering if perhaps it might spark some conversation about how true passion can triumph. Ethan, however, waved it off as a nice rags-to-riches story, looking visibly disinterested. He was more concerned with finalizing the seating chart, ensuring that the right executives and socialites were placed together for optimal networking. Through it all, Pamela's heart weighed heavier with each passing hour. She recalled a time when she had been Sabelo's biggest cheerleader, listening to his ideas late into the night and urging him not to lose hope. Now she felt like a traitor to that shared dream. She had chosen riches over risk, and the decision now loomed over her like a judgment she couldn't escape. Whenever she managed a moment alone, she considered calling Sabelo, just to congratulate him, to hear his voice, to explain herself. But the fear of rejection and the embarrassment of her own choices stilled her hand. The ring on her finger gleamed with merciless clarity, a symbol of the wealth and status she had prioritized. The day before the wedding, as flowers were delivered and the cathedral was decorated, Pamela stood in the middle of Ethan's penthouse, feeling every bit like an outsider. The press of time, the unstoppable march toward the ceremony, and the finality of the vow she was about to take churned her stomach. She tried to imagine her married life with Ethan. Lavish parties, high-level business dinners, vacations in exotic locales. And she also pictured Sabelo, continuing to create works that spoke to the soul, forging a legacy with or without her. The question burned in her mind. Had she made the right choice, or had she trapped herself in a life that would never truly fulfill her? The eve of the wedding arrived, blanketed in a mix of chaos and forced cheerfulness. Pamela woke up early to attend final dress fittings and oversee last-minute floral arrangements. The wedding planner, perpetually glued to an earpiece, seemed to manage half a dozen tasks at once, coordinating with caterers, musicians, and venue staff. For an event designed to celebrate love, the day felt more like a logistical military operation. Despite the hustle, Pamela could not ignore the tightening knot of anxiety in her stomach. While she dutifully tested cake samples and inspected table centerpieces, her thoughts circled back to one question: am I really going to do this? She could hardly look at her own reflection without feeling a surge of panic. Even the wedding dress, a masterpiece of lace and beading, felt heavy on her body, as if it were fashioned not from fabric but from her mounting doubts. By late afternoon, her parents arrived at the penthouse for a small pre-wedding gathering. They had always envisioned a simple ceremony for their daughter, but this lavish affair was far beyond their imagination. Her mother, a woman accustomed to frugal living, examined the opulent surroundings with both admiration and unease. Her father eyed his daughter with concerned affection, gently pulling her aside to ask, "Are you happy, sweetheart?" She wanted to answer honestly, to pour out every conflicted thought about Ethan, the emptiness of their interactions, and the lingering memories of Sabelo. But her courage faltered. She mustered a trembling smile and nodded, noticing how her father's brow furrowed at her less than convincing reassurance. That evening, Pamela's last night as an unmarried woman, was spent in a luxury suite at the hotel where the wedding would take place. A few close friends joined her for a quiet bridal night in, complete with champagne and spa treatments. Though they tried to maintain a festive atmosphere, Pamela's vacant stares and lukewarm laughter revealed her turmoil. One friend finally spoke up. "Pam, you know you don't have to do anything you're not ready for. We'll support you no matter what." Tears stung the corners of Pamela's eyes. She thought about how unfair it would be to back out now. How many people had flown in, how much money had been spent, how much face Ethan would lose if she called it off. The social and financial fallout felt crippling. Alone in her suite after midnight, she gazed at the glittering city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows, recalling the first time she had stepped into Ethan's world. It had been captivating, but now the allure seemed to have tarnished, replaced by a sense of impending entrapment. She pictured herself walking down the aisle in front of hundreds of guests, all eyes fixed on her. In that vision she felt not excitement but dread. Laying her head against the cool glass pane, she whispered, "What have I done?" Her heart ached with the realization that she might be trading her happiness for a future that held no genuine warmth. Yet, with only hours remaining, she struggled to find an escape from the meticulously orchestrated event that was about to crown her as Mrs. Ethan, sealing her fate in a gilded life that might leave her soul unfulfilled. The morning of the wedding broke in a haze of nerves and sleeplessness. Pamela barely touched her breakfast, although a lavish spread had been sent to her suite. The wedding planner arrived promptly, clutching a checklist and a coffee, barking instructions to the hair and makeup team. Time seemed to speed up, everything moving in fast forward while Pamela felt stuck in slow motion. Her friends hovered around, trying to keep her spirits up as they helped her step into the ornate gown. The mirror reflected a vision of bridal perfection: delicate lace sleeves, a fitted bodice adorned with shimmering embroidery, and a flowing train that stretched across the polished floor. Yet inside she felt anything but radiant. Her thoughts pounded like a relentless drumbeat. "I have to speak up. I can't go through with this blindly." When Ethan's mother entered, praising her future daughter-in-law's beauty, Pamela felt an urge to run. She managed a stiff smile, barely paying attention to the older woman's glowing remarks. Finally, as the finishing touches were applied to her hair and veil, Pamela excused herself under the pretense of needing a moment alone. She stepped into a quiet corridor near the suite, closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Summoning her courage, she dialed Ethan's number. He picked up immediately, thinking she was calling about some last-minute detail. Before he could say much, Pamela whispered, "Ethan, I need to talk to you." Away from everyone else. A few minutes later, they found themselves in a small, private lounge down the hall. Ethan appeared slightly annoyed, checking his watch as if to say, "We have no time for this." But when he caught the tremor in Pamela's voice, he realized the gravity of her request. "Is this really about love?" she asked, tears threatening to spill. "Or is this another deal you're closing just a way to boost your image? 'Cause I feel like a prop, Ethan. I'm not sure you even see me as a person with wants and fears." Ethan's face hardened. He insisted she was being unreasonable, rattling off how much effort and money he had poured into this wedding. He reminded her of the guest list. Executives, potential clients, influential friends. "Do you realize how humiliating it would be for everyone if you back out now?" He snapped, the veneer of calm breaking. "I've done everything to ensure your comfort, and this is how you repay me. By questioning my motives on our wedding day." His words, though delivered in a hushed tone, reverberated with an anger that Pamela had rarely seen. She glimpsed in that moment the true nature of his feelings. He was concerned less about her emotional well-being and more about preserving his polished reputation. A wave of despair washed over her. The confrontation confirmed her worst fears. In Ethan's eyes, she was part of an image, not a cherished partner. Shaken, Pamela fought back sobs. She turned away, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. Her heart pounded with the realization that she was about to make a monumental choice: walk down the aisle to appease appearances or walk away to salvage her integrity. Ethan stood there, eyes blazing, offering no reassurance, only the threat of scandal if she dared to make the wrong decision. She realized, with painful clarity, that continuing would be a betrayal of herself. And she couldn't ignore the echo in her mind that whispered of Sabelo's unwavering conviction. His genuine passion that once felt like the most precious thing in the world. Minutes before the ceremony was set to begin, the grand cathedral bustled with chatter. Rays of afternoon sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, illuminating rows of elegantly dressed guests and exquisite floral arrangements. A string quartet played softly, setting a serene mood that contrasted sharply with the tempest in Pamela's heart. In a nearby anteroom, she stood alone, veiled and dressed in white, clutching a bouquet of roses. Her reflection in the mirror looked ethereal, but she felt frail, as if a single push would shatter her resolve. The wedding planner peeked inside, gesturing anxiously. "We're ready for you, Ms. Pamela. It's almost time to walk." Pamela inhaled sharply. Nodding, she dismissed the planner with a forced smile, pretending she just needed one last moment to compose herself. The door closed, leaving her alone again with her thoughts. This was it, the point of no return. If she walked down that aisle, she would tie herself to a life of luxury and carefully orchestrated appearances. She knew deep down that Ethan, for all his wealth and social standing, would never offer the kind of unconditional understanding she once had with Sabelo. A single tear slipped down her cheek, catching on the lace trim of her veil. The organ music began, signaling the procession. She heard the soft murmur of guests and the confident footsteps of the bridesmaids, each taking their place along the aisle. Pamela's pulse raced. Her father, waiting just outside to escort her, looked at her questioningly. She offered him a trembling apology, then whispered, "I can't do this, Daddy. I'm sorry." Before he could respond, she gathered the skirts of her gown and slipped out a side exit. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in gasps. She thought she heard someone shout her name, perhaps the wedding planner realizing something was amiss. But there was no turning back. She dashed down a quiet hallway, out a service door, and into the open air of the street. Her body trembled with a mix of relief and terror. In her haste, she left behind almost everything but her clutch. Inside it, just enough cash to hail a cab. She flagged one down, instructing the driver to head to the address she knew by heart, the warehouse that Sabelo had dreamed of turning into an art mecca. During the silent journey, she struggled with the reality of what she had done. The scandal would be enormous. Ethan's anger would be immeasurable. But the alternative, living a lie, had become unbearable. When the taxi pulled up to the warehouse, dusk was settling, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange. She stepped out, still in her wedding gown, its train dragging over dusty pavement. Heart pounding, she approached the door and knocked with trembling fingers. After a few moments it swung open. Sabelo stood there, clearly shocked, eyes wide as he took in the sight of her in full bridal regalia. In that moment, the floodgates of her regret and longing burst open. She choked out the words she had been rehearsing in her mind for weeks. "I'm sorry. I left you when I should have believed in you. I should have believed in us." Tears welled in Sabelo's eyes as he studied her. The pain he once felt was evident, yet there was also compassion. He didn't move to embrace her immediately, but he didn't turn her away either. In the background, the warehouse buzzed with signs of his artistic success. Partially completed canvases, boxes awaiting shipment, a handful of staff curating his latest exhibition. Pamela realized she was stepping into a life that had moved on without her, one she had abandoned in pursuit of wealth. Whether Sabelo would or could welcome her back was uncertain. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Pamela felt a weight lifted from her chest. She had chosen authenticity over appearances, risking everything for the chance at a real connection. As she stood there in the threshold, still adorned in wedding finery, she realized that no matter how the chips fell, she had finally broken free from the gilded trap she had built around herself. Sabelo exhaled, stepping aside to let her enter, and in that single gesture, hope flickered for them both. An uncertain future, yes, but one grounded in truth, possibility, and perhaps even forgiveness.